The topic for today is supposed to be lessons that we've learned from Bersih. And perhaps I can start with the first lesson that we learned through Bersih, and that is that your message must be simple and it must appeal to the hearts and minds of the people. When your cause is easy to understand and it appeals to the hearts and minds of the people, you will have no problem getting their support. That is the first thing we learned from Bersih. The second thing, and I think we did the right thing by transforming Bersih into a purely civil society movement. A lot of support came in for Bersih, and because a lot of people have told me this, because it transformed from a political, a mix of political parties as well as NGOs to a purely NGO movement. But whilst we can take the credit for transforming it, the credit for starting the whole idea of fighting for electoral reform goes to the political parties and the NGOs who started Bersih 1. And I commend them for that. Because without that, and in fact, if I'm not mistaken, it's Sivarasa who came up with the name Bersih, I believe. And it's such a brand name now. It should be registered actually as a trademark. But they started the movement. Because before then, no one thought that we needed to do something about the electoral process in this country. No one realized that there was something very, very wrong about the electoral process. So that is another lesson that we learned, that it's good, movements have to change, movements transform, and I think it transformed into a civil society movement at the right time. So whilst, of course, everybody says we are pro-Pakatan, we keep getting that thrown at us all the time. Well, what I say is this. It is not so much us supporting Pakatan as Pakatan supporting us. And that's not surprising. Because they have always, as I said, please don't die of shock that Pakatan is supporting Bersih, because one of their issues is that they suffered because we do not have free and fair elections. So that's another thing that we learned, another lesson from Bersih. The lesson really being that you have to keep evolving. Now, the third thing that we learned was you never give in to intimidation. We learned that the hard way. They tried everything that they could. They threw everything at us, personally, as well as a group. You all know that story. And in fact, I think we won a lot of support because of the way we were being attacked, I think. This was in 2011. And they went overboard. They wanted to use the ISA, they attacked me personally, and so on and so forth. But so never give in to intimidation, because you give in to intimidation once, they will use it over and over again against you. They need to learn that intimidation will not work. And I think that was not just a lesson for us, I think that was also a lesson for them, and an important one. And I think, as I say, it's not easy. It wasn't easy. It hasn't been easy. It hasn't been easy for all the Bersih steering committee members. But I think at the end of the day, the strength that we got because of you. Because we'd be nowhere without the support of the Malaysian public. And I can tell you, I recall Bersih 2. This was July 2011. When, in fact, I was arrested in the tunnel, the tunnel incident, tear gas and so on. And I didn't realize how many people had come out on that day in the rest of Kuala Lumpur till I got home, because I was arrested and then I was kept in the police station and then sent home. Until I got home and I looked at the net and I couldn't believe the numbers who turned out. If you remember the intimidation on that day, there were roadblocks everywhere. You couldn't get into Kuala Lumpur. But Malaysians were smart. They knew how to make sure they were there right in the center of Kuala Lumpur, near the Stadium Merdeka. Nobody was going to stop them. So the other lesson is, once you take people out of their comfort zone, they realize that it's not that difficult. And they are never the same again. When you pull them out of their comfort zone and get them to overcome fear, they are never the same again. And the country is never the same again. And that's what happened that day. That day, Malaysians overcame fear. So Bersih 3, so about 50,000 over people came out for Bersih 2. Bersih 3 was 200,000 plus people. And you know, I had the best view in the house because I was standing on the truck and I couldn't even see the end of the crowd, actually, on all sides. So I used to say, it was a wonderful view. I'll tell you why. Because at all costs, they did not want us to go onto Dataran Merdeka. So that patch of green had hundreds of riot police protecting it, but the rest of Kuala Lumpur was filled by us, by yellow t-shirts, by Bersih supporters. We crowded out the rest of the area, and that lonely patch of green was still guarded by the police at that time. It looked silly, frankly. They should have just allowed us onto Dataran Merdeka, but they were insistent that we should not go there. Now, so that is about intimidation and fear. The other thing I realized was, and we all realized, was that this movement and any movement can only work if you are honest with the public, if you are honest with the people, if you tell them very frankly what the movement is about. If you make a mistake, admit it. That's what we learned. If we made mistakes, we would frankly admit it. When they asked us, were we funded by foreign organizations, we said yes, and we said to a tune of 94,000+. We even told them the figure. We told the truth about everything. Our accounts are on the website. And that makes a difference. Because when you tell the public the truth all the time, that's where you build up your credibility. And of course, the opposite is true, lah. In our country, of course, we are so used to hearing untruths all the time that really whatever that person then says after that, you are suspicious about whether it's true or not. So if you want your movement to survive and stand the test of time, that is how it must be built on honesty. And it must be built on frank disclosure to the public. And we have nothing to hide anyway. Now, another thing that was very important for me was that, or something I realized was that you cannot have a personal agenda when you want to lead a movement like Bersih, or any movement. Because that's how they immediately attacked. If you remember, she's going to run for elections. She's doing it for personal benefit. That's the first thing that comes to everyone's mind. They cannot believe that anybody would do something like lead Bersih just because it is good for the country. Everybody said, there's a personal agenda. But they couldn't find any personal agenda for anyone sitting on our steering committee. Every single one of the steering committee members, and you know the names, were there because we truly, truly believed in the cause, and we truly, truly believe, and I still believe, that it is an important movement for Malaysia. So till now, they still haven't worked out the personal agenda. They still think there's a personal agenda, and they can't figure it out. But you know why? Because they judge us by their standards. which is why we need to set a new standard. We need to set a new standard for leadership. We need to insist that all our leaders, government, opposition, everyone, are serving the nation and serving the people. They have to be selfless. For me, you don't take up public office unless you fully intend to serve the nation. And of course, we're a long way from that. But I'll come to that in a minute. Sorry, I need my notes. Okay, the other thing I discovered, or we learned from Bersih, is that social media was a powerful tool to spread our message. My personal thanks to Malaysiakini, Malaysian Insider, all the online media, because they really made the difference. Social media made the difference. It is a great leveler between human beings. It levels the playing field. It gives those on the other side, as it were, an even chance or a better chance. And it empowers the people. That's what's important. Information is empowering. And that's what social media did. It has empowered Malaysian people. And I know, well, all of you obviously are subscribers of Malaysiakini. How many subscribers have you got now? Do you know? Is it 2.5 million readers? And I can tell you your articles make it around anyway, whether they are subscribers or not. But the online media, and I have to also mention Malaysian Insider here, sorry, but I think they did a very good job over, honestly, what Malaysiakini and Insider and other online media did for us for these elections was a real service to the Rakyat. It was a real service to the Rakyat. And I think people made more informed choices. The other lesson I would say that we've learned is that we must have faith in Malaysians. Because that's the one thing I realized. Because when you have people shouting in the media, you know, and a small group who are constantly shouting and warning, you know, we like to warn, you realize that, right? These groups who come out and are constantly warning the rest of us, they don't believe in dialogue. They just like warning and shouting and so on and so forth. So when you read that in the mainstream press, you think, and even, of course, Malaysiakini would report that, you would think that these people constitute the majority of Malaysians. I can tell you, they do not. They are the minority. So when you do anything, when you take on a cause, have faith in the decency of the Malaysian people, because I can tell you, the number of people who are offended by the way in which these people speak, by the way in which they behave. You remember that little, not little incident, but incident outside my house, for example. The number of people who came to me, I actually had a room full of flowers sent to me by people I don't even know. I had people come and visit me. I had prayer groups from various religions coming to my house and praying with me because they couldn't stomach what was happening. That's the ordinary Malaysian person on the street, let me tell you. So, and when I go out, the number of times I've had my meals paid for me, I'll ask for the bill and they'll say, oh, it's paid by someone who just walked out. So those are little, it's just wonderful because you then know you're doing something right. And these people don't know any other way of expressing their thanks or appreciation for what is being done, and that's how they do it. And more, you will find more and more Malaysians, and I know all of you are here because of that too, are here to say, we don't like what is happening. We don't like what we're reading. We don't like extremism. So, really, at the end of the day, and I know, and I'll come to it at the end, because I know a lot of people feel depressed, perhaps, because change didn't take place in the 13th general elections. People are depressed because of what they read in the press every day. It's never a dull moment in Malaysia. Every day there is someone talking rubbish, sorry. Some of our leaders really need lessons in etiquette. And so on and so forth. But I'm here to tell you that do not despair. There's lots of us. In fact, there's more of us. There's more of us who want a decent life for ourselves and our children than those who pretend to represent the interests of the Malaysians. Now, the other lesson, sorry, many, many lessons from Bersih, yeah? But the other lesson is that you should never stoop to the low levels that some of your opponents will stoop to. Never do that. Always speak from a position, from an informed position, from a position of decency, of goodwill, of good faith. Never ever descend to the levels that any of your opponents descend to. Keep your movement above all that. And never let them personalize it, because that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to personalize it to me. So then they would attack me personally, thinking they were attacking Bersih. But I never responded to those attacks, because as far as I was concerned, it was never a personal thing. Bersih was never about me. Never make it about one person. And I can tell you, Bersih is not about one person. You will see. You know I'm leaving at the end of this month. And you will see Bersih grow from strength to strength. Maria, who's taking over, has my absolute and utter respect. If I was doing all the talking, Maria was doing all the working in Bersih for the last 3 years. She has earned her position as leader of Bersih. So that's the other lesson. Never let it be about one person. Because, and how do you do that? You make people own it. You allow people to dictate how they want to do things. You allow people the freedom to use Bersih. This young man who's wearing a Bersih t-shirt, I was so happy when I came in. Because Bersih means so much. Andrew sent me a picture today of someone on a motorbike with a Bersih t-shirt. So the more ownership people feel of this movement, of a good cause, the better. Because then no one can destroy it. You may be able to destroy 1, 2, 3 people, but you can never destroy the movement. And the wonderful thing about Bersih is, it's international. In Bersih 2, in 2011, Bersih movements, Bersih rallies were also held at the same time in over 30 cities worldwide. Bersih 3, it was held in more than 80 cities worldwide. And it's growing. Bersih, it's called Global Bersih movement. You go anywhere in the world, you'd contact a Bersih supporter. You will find a friend. Just as they give hell to some of our, of course, to some of our leaders who go overseas, you will find a friend if you're a Bersih supporter. So that's how it has become international. So to me, actually, it's just going to keep growing and growing. There's no stopping a movement like Bersih. Now, of course, education for me is key. And this is what we need to do before 2014. One of the criticisms of Bersih, and I accept it, I take it on board, is that we were perhaps so much an urban movement. And I think that is something, that is a criticism we must take on board. And we are taking on board. Because we need, in other words, we need to reach out more. We are not just urban, we are more than that, but we haven't reached out to the outlying areas, to the rural areas enough. And when you look at Sabah and Sarawak, we just haven't reached out enough. So that is one of the lessons we have learned, that really Bersih has to be much more than an urban movement. Now, and I think at the end of the day, the lesson from Bersih is, and this is where I say, I've had many people come up to me and say, look, what next? What's going to happen? Is there going to be a Bersih 4 is the next question. And what do we do? Because we don't like what's happening. Many people don't like what's happening. My answer to that is never give up. You can take a break. A lot of people work very hard for the 13th general elections. You can take a breather. But you've got to come back fighting. Because let me tell you, there are still a lot of issues that we need to deal with. And this is where I'd like to spend 5 minutes talking about this nation that we love. We're doing all that we do because we love Malaysia. There is really cause for concern, because after the 13th general elections, many people felt that we hope the Barisan Nasional has learned some lessons and that things will improve, because they will take on board that a lot of people are unhappy with a lot of things. And any responsible government would take that on board and would try and reach out, will try and be inclusive, and will try to do what is best for the country. But we didn't see that. The first thing we saw was an attack on the Chinese tsunami. Then we see totally racist remarks. We see remarks which are fascist. We see legislation like the Prevention of Crime Act, bringing back the ISA through the back door. We have police and Home Minister coming out saying shoot to kill, speaking to a select group of audience and saying, look, you know, and talking about gangsters, they're Indians who are killing the Malays, that kind of thing, you know. And so many examples, you know, since elections, since the 5th of May, have you had a single time where you have felt from reading the mainstream press that we live in a united Malaysia? Have you felt that? You haven't, because our leaders are not giving those signals out. So a lot of people have come to me and said they're very, very concerned about what's happening in this country. And I think, in fact, I wanted to write an article, but it was also raised by Malaysian Insider when they queried and said, what's happened to our moral compass? And I think that's the question we need to ask ourselves. What has happened to the moral compass of the leadership in this country? Do they really care about the legacy that we are going to leave our children? And ultimately, that's what we are fighting for. We want to leave a legacy that our children can be proud of. And I know that there are so many of us, all of us sitting here, and so many more out there who want to be united, who don't like this extremism. I'm told that there are people who voted for Barisan Nasional who are appalled by the way they are behaving now. So what does the Prime Minister do? He sets up, or it's set up already, but appoints new people onto a unity council. And they have 6 months to deliberate and come up with a blueprint. That's all very well and good. But ultimately, it's down to the leadership. I'm sorry. The buck stops with the Prime Minister. If the Prime Minister shows no leadership in uniting the people, then you can set up 50 councils who deliberate behind closed doors. If you're not going to listen to them and you're not going to take the leadership, it's not going to happen. But that's the bad news. But the good news, and I want to leave you with on a positive note, the good news is that, again, have faith in the decency of the Malaysian people. Be rest assured that if you had to count, I would bet that the majority of Malaysians in this country are decent people, that we want a fair system, we want our strong institutions, we want democracy, we want our vote to count. Now look at the revelation. That's why I say God works in mysterious ways. The revelation by the former EC chair. Did you all read that? That's Malaysiakini has covered it very well. Basically saying, oh, we redelineate boundaries based on race. That's basically what he's saying. To shore up or ensure Malay power. I can tell you it's got nothing to do with Malay power. Because some of the redelineation works against PAS. How can it be for Malay power? It is for Barisan Nasional to stay in power. That's what it's for. We've been saying it, by the way. In fact, Andrew was saying we should put up a sign, we told you so, because Bersih has been saying it for the longest time. They have been redelineating to keep Barisan Nasional in power. There is now practically an admission by the EC chair, the former EC chair. And when the deputy EC chair, who's apparently retiring tomorrow, was asked, he didn't deny it. He just said, we followed orders. Of course, EC chair says, oh, we don't do anything like that. Well, we'll have to wait and see. But that's why I say you can take a breather for a little while, but not for long. You've got to come back, and we've got to come back. We've got to be vigilant. We've got to educate people outside there. Do you know that I have groups of people, I know groups of people who have come up to me and said, we are going to start, for the next 5 years, we are going to go out and talk to the people. And I know that they go at weekends to places outside KL, just talking to them in their own mother tongue and explaining what democracy is about, what voting is about, what elections are about. Malaysians are already doing it. So that's what we have to do. And we must be vigilant. With the redelineation process that's happening, we have to ensure that this election commission doesn't allow another election to be stolen from the people. That's what we have to do. And I'll end by saying that never before in the history of Malaysia have I ever seen Malaysians so invested in our electoral process as I saw on the 13th general elections, on the 5th of May. People felt it was their elections. Did you feel that? And it was. They were there protecting it. They were there watching. They were fabulous. So that's what we need for the 14th general elections. But before then, there is work to be done. And we can all do our little bit. We can all do our little bit by talking to people, by going out, and making sure that all these stories that they are told do not come into play at the next general elections. Many of them, let me tell you very frankly, have come and said, yeah, they voted the way they voted because they really were scared the Chinese were going to take over if they didn't. I'll tell you that very frankly. So this is the kind of misinformation that we need to put a stop to. And I suppose there's no harm. And I think journalists play a big part here, and you've done a wonderful job. Congratulations to all the journalists in Malaysiakini and all those journalists who go out there and ferret information from our leaders, constantly questioning. And I think maybe we too should reach out, not just to opposition, we too should reach out to the Barisan MPs. We should talk to them whenever you have a chance. If they are your MP in your constituency, go and see them, speak to them, eyeball to eyeball, and ask them, is this the kind of Malaysia you want to leave to your children? Just ask them that question. And I think we need to keep them accountable. And that's what's important. Ladies and gentlemen, when I say Malaysians were invested in the elections, basically I'm saying they are invested in building democracy in this country, and that is the best investment you can make. Thank you.
Hi, Ambiga. Thank you so much for sharing your experience.
Thank you.
Right after the G13 elections, Bersih had organized kind of a fact-finding mission or a commission to find out what exactly happened. Can you give us some ideas to what the results were?
What's
Thank
happening?
you.
Yes. Bersih, as you know, we set up a people's tribunal. We had two people from overseas, very respected people. One is a top constitutional lawyer associated with the UN. The other is a former, if I'm not mistaken, deputy chair of the EC in Indonesia. And three, of course, very respected people from Malaysia. They heard evidence over 5 days in September. And basically, there were horror stories. I think Malaysiakini also carried many of those reports. And we are expecting a report from that panel at the end of January, I think. There was a lot of material, so we don't want to rush them. They need to go through it carefully, and we hope they will make recommendations as well. And so we are awaiting the outcome of that inquiry soon.
Next, any more questions?
Ambiga, I can't help feeling that perhaps the rut has set in, and there's been so much of polarization and silo kind of, culturalization, if you like, that sometimes to have hope gets a bit difficult. Just tell me I'm wrong and tell me why.
Okay. I don't blame you for feeling that way. I find it very irritating to have to read some of these news items. But you see, here's the thing. We can choose to do nothing and allow them to set the agenda, or we must push back. We've got to stop it. And that's why, for example, let me give you one example. If you talk about religious extremism, you find sisters in Islam being at the forefront of statements resisting. Now you see a few more people speaking up. But that's not enough. More people have to speak up. More people have to say, sorry, this is not what we want. You are not going to set the agenda. We are going to set the agenda. Now, as far as racial differences, let me tell you my personal story, which is the Bersih story. They use race against me, I can tell you. They use gender against me as well. But it didn't work. At the end of the day, 200,000 over people came out at Bersih 3. Do you remember there was even an article in the press saying I was not fit to lead Bersih because I was supporting all sorts of, I think it was the LGBT and all sorts of things. It didn't make a difference. People still came out, and that's why I still have hope that some people, and they're the ones who speak the loudest, who shout the loudest and get the most coverage, but they are not the majority. I am still convinced they are not the majority. But what we must do as the majority is to come out and stop them. We shouldn't allow them to carry on. So do we have hope? Absolutely. Look at all of you. Look at all of us here today. Of course there is.
Do you think that the only way the opposition will get a fair chance at the next election if there is a fair redelineation exercise, and how likely is that?
Yes, and I think the redelineation exercise is critical. That really worked against the opposition, and the simplest way of explaining it is this: despite the fact that Barisan got 48+% of the popular vote, they got 133 seats. Whereas Pakatan, who got 50% of the popular vote, got 89 seats. That's because of gerrymandering. That's because of the way your boundaries are drawn, largely. So it is critical. It is critical. It has a direct impact on the number of seats that the opposition can win. So that's very important. Will they do it? Well, they're hiding. We have been asking for the EC to come clean and tell us what they're doing. But it's already taking place. The process for redelineation is already taking place. And we want them to stop. In fact, today we issued a statement saying stop the redelineation process because they are using the GE13 electoral roll to draw the boundaries. You know what's wrong with the electoral roll, GE13 electoral roll. The Sabah RCI will tell you what's wrong with the GE electoral roll. So we want them to clean up that roll before they do the delineation exercise. But they are still rushing through with it. There is actually no need to rush. There is no time limit when they need to do it. So do I think they're going to clean up? No. And we're going to have to keep pressing for that. Right now, no. Yes, it hasn't been set up. In Parliament, yes. There was supposed to be a select committee that is supposed to oversee what the EC is doing, but we haven't heard anything about that. So it is a problem. It's a major problem, actually. Well, we all have to push for it. And I think the MPs, Pakatan MPs have raised it, but I think civil society has to push in a big way. So if anything brings on Bersih 4, it's going to be that. I can't say, I won't be in charge anymore, but I suspect.
Good evening, Dr. Ambiga.
Yes.
Okay, my question is, after Maria taking over, what will be your next direction?
My role.
Will you still heading Bersih, or will you be back to...
I will, no one can ever leave Bersih. Let me tell you, well, the precise role that any of us play will be up to the new committee. We will do what they want us to do. But as far as advocacy is concerned, I will certainly still be advocating the Bersih position wherever I go. I will still be giving talks. So you never leave Bersih. A movement like Bersih is everybody's and you can never leave it.
Good evening, Ms. Ambiga. What can the youth do in this process of the movement? How can the youth help? Because we can't vote under 21. So how can we help this movement?
Thank you very much for that question. And that's an excellent question. The very fact that you're here and you're asking that question gives me a lot of hope in the youth. I have a lot of hope in the youth, by the way. But from the minute you start understanding what's happening in this country, and that can be way before you are 21, you should start getting involved. And I think the way the youth can help is by helping us with the advocacy, by spreading correct information, by, you can go onto our website, we've talked about delineation, etc. We've explained as much as we can there. You can volunteer with us. And I think what I would like to see is, how old are you? So in 4 years, the minute you hit your 21st birthday, will you promise to register to vote? And that's what you should be telling your friends. Making sure every single one of you is registered to vote before the next general elections. That's the basic thing you can do. But apart from that, keep yourself informed. That's my advice. Keep yourself informed. Thank you. Yes.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, I'm a father.
You should be very proud of your daughter.
You know, we as parents, we face challenges. You know, we are already stuck here. We see things getting from bad to worse. We see this gerrymandering. G12, they got caught with their pants down. So they lost a lot of seats. G13, while we were having all these talks and all that, we got the crowds, they were busy monitoring, and that's what they were doing. And they're going to do that again, G14, right?
Yes.
We have children who, parents, the parents are all migrating. Do we see a future for them? We are okay here. We are okay, we had a good life and all that. But what about our children? Is it really, it seems to be getting worse. For our children, should we tell them, study overseas and if you're happy there, enjoy your good life? Or should we say, no, stay here, stay and fight. But is there that hope? I find it difficult to advise them. I want them to stay. But in the end, their future, you understand?
No, we all face that. We all have children. But I can tell you, as far as my children are concerned, they will make up their own minds. And this is what I say about the youth. And that's where we need to lead by example. Because if we give up in this country, you can't expect them to have hope. So I would say it is worth fighting. Just answer me this question. Is Malaysia worth fighting for, in your view? It is in my view too. And I've always felt, I remember once when I apologized to the youth, your daughter's age, and I said, actually, it's our fault, my generation, because we should have fought harder earlier. That's what I feel we should have done. But we were all so set in our ways, and the economy was doing well. There were successes galore, over the past 30 years, booming, etc., etc. But a lot of us never realized, but we did, the lawyers did, because the lawyers generally do see these things, that our institutions were being torn down and undermined. All that success that we had came at a huge cost to the country, which we are paying now. So I think we should have done more, my generation. But it's not too late. And as long as we think Malaysia is worth fighting for, and I still believe it is, then we need to set the example. We need to say we are not giving up on this country. And we need to show them that it's worth fighting for. And because I'll tell you about the youth today, my reading. They will make up their own minds. We're not going to be able to tell them what to do. The world is their oyster. They don't like it here, I can tell you they will leave without your even asking them to leave. And that's why we are losing our talent. When I travel overseas and I see the Malaysians out there, the talent, those people should be here, they would be building up this country into a powerhouse, and yet they're outside the shores. And when I see them outside, I don't blame them. I don't say, why did you leave? I ask, why couldn't we keep them? Because that's the question we should be asking ourselves. And I'll tell you something, a lot of people had faith in the 13GE, they really thought they were going to see change. People were prepared to come home. They told me that. They were prepared to come home and build up this nation if things had changed. So we have the talent, we have the interest, we have the time, we have 5 years. And I know you said they were busy, working. I can tell you, Barisan Nasional has already started working for the 14 general elections. That's why I'm telling you, take a breather, but there's not much time. We need to build. We need to build how? By educating. We need to build by giving information, because that is what is going to make the difference in the 14 general, provided we have a clean and fair election, of course. And we need to push for clean and fair elections. So my answer would be, of course you must have faith. Have faith. I know, we are all fed up. We're so fed up with some of the idiots who are sitting in parliament. I mean, I despair. I think today somebody ticked off the Sarawak, one of the Sarawak MPs, for making a completely sexist comment. And they don't feel bad. The speaker says, he was saying it in jest. They don't even understand. It doesn't even get into their heads that as leaders, as legislators, they are the ones who need to set the example. They don't see that as their role. So for me, actually, we need to protect our parliament and make sure we don't have idiots in there next round. Yes. Thank you. Yes.
And you also mentioned all the human efforts we put in, like Malaysiakini, Bersih, and all the hopes and no hopes that we have. What about bringing in intervention of God?
God. Of course. I can tell you, I'm religious, but I don't impose it on anybody. It's really between you and God, I think, what happens. But prayer, I believe, a lot of people prayed for Bersih, certainly prayed for me, and I do feel a protecting force, but that's me. And for me, prayer and religion and God is entirely between me and God. And I think it is up to each and every individual to find their strength in prayer if that is where they find their strength. If they find their strength there, it will help them. So I think that is really something that is up to the individual. I believe in it though, personally. Bring as another factor? I don't follow actually. Oh, I personally believe that, yes.